Welcome to the Amplified CEO with VC and serial entrepreneur Richard Stroupe.
With today's guest, Tyson Nargassans. He's an operating advisor at Jurassic Capital and the founder and former CEO of Saylent, a fintech company he led to a successful exit. Tyson is a seasoned board member, founder, and CEO who has scaled multiple B2B software companies, empowering teams and using data to drive results across fintech, healthcare, and enterprise software.
Tyson, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Absolutely. You recently spoke at a Jim Roberts event a couple weeks ago at UNC Wilmington, and I was in attendance, and I was very impressed to hear your background and your skill set and everything that you've accomplished. So, of course, I had to ask you to come to this podcast. So thank you for coming and indulging us.
Well, I get to talk about all the things that we did. It's some of the fun times. So thank you.
Absolutely. So going off your involvement with Jim Roberts and others, how active are you kind of giving back to the community and sharing your story and the kind of an advisor role and just helping organizations like Jim's?
I think there's a lot of people who've helped me over the time of my career. And one of the things when you found a company, there's just a lot of big efforts, small efforts, just people along the way. And so I have always wanted to give back. It's one of the things I think that fills my cup. I wish I could do it more. I try to do it as much as I can. And right now I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that. I try and tell people all the time, there's tons of things I've done well, I think. And then there's a lot more probably that I didn't do well. Both offer value, I think, to people who are going through it the first time or just want another perspective.
Right.
Founding a business, running it, being a CEO is a lonely job sometimes, especially if you are, well, even if you have co-founders, it's still lonely. It's often, you don't know who to talk to and what you should share and how you should do that. So I try to be a resource as much as I can to everybody else and help it out. And I've really enjoyed it, getting involved with CD, Jim Roberts, just local ecosystem, the founders. It's been a tremendous joy for me.
That's great. Now, do you sit on boards, a lot of boards now? How active are you?
I don't sit on any boards currently. I sat on Rubrik. I do like the board perspective. I think I've learned a lot having done it, both sitting on a board and working with a board. I think I know where your value should be. I would like to sit on more boards. I think it's a really interesting perspective. It's one of the things I have not been a big proponent of CEO coaching, and I'm sure they offer a lot of value to different people. From my perspective, I liked hearing somebody else's problem and being able to relate it to what I've experienced. And I think when you see it from a different perspective, I'm human like everybody else. You'll get too close to it, and the old forest through the trees, right? And so trying to see it from a different perspective is something that I think is really valuable at all levels. And I would encourage every founder to stay out, talk to people, see it from a different lens, and try and then apply that problem to your business. Because one of the things you recognize is the patterns are pretty similar.
Right. So pivoting off that, what's your views on today's world? I know your background is in B2B software and fintech, or data science, I guess. Like, what is your views on today's economy and everything is going on right now around the world?
It's a really interesting time for B2B SaaS. There's the gloom and doom message around AI is going to overtake everything and vertical SaaS isn't going to be relevant. And then there's the other side of that coin, I suppose, where AI is going to cause everybody to just be more productive and more effective and more focused on the problems at hand and less on the menial tasks. And I think I ride somewhere in the middle of those. I've seen enough trends, I think, where, we started Saylent in 2006. Back in that time, it was big data, Hadoop, data lakes, data warehouses. It moved and morphed to visualizations and analytics, insights, and then it morphed into machine learning, then it morphed into AI, and now it's LLM and, whatever will be next. So I think, like anything, technology advances. You need to be flexible enough to advance with that and see how you're going to take that new landscape and apply it to your business. There are still problems to be solved. Computers aren't going to be able to solve them all. And so, but it does require a shift. I think, that's the technology side of it. I think the business side and the sort of macroeconomic environment's also changed a lot, where there was growth at all costs for a period of time. Go back to the .com when I was there, and it was all about just raise money and grow. Today, everybody cares about profitable growth or cash efficient growth or the like. They're not interested in this grow at all costs mentality. And so I just encourage founders. I was talking to one on the ride down today, and I just said, the most important thing you can do for your business is to show people or prove that people want it. And that can come in a lot of forms, but the proverbial traction, show that people are interested in what you're doing. And I think be wary of building what you want versus what people are telling you they're interested in. And there's a fine line between holding your vision and being stubborn with it.
Right.
So,
yeah. Have you been experimenting with any AI tools and just for research purposes or commenting to other founders about how to adopt AI to?
I have. That's been my big effort this sort of transition period that I'm in right now, was trying to really use AI to my own advantage and to learn about that and where can it be used and how smart is it and sometimes how dumb is it and where can it be applied to make me more productive. So as I've started to learn these AI tools, the thing that has been really valuable has been learning new markets, understanding new competitive trends, where is the size and market moving, and then taking those learnings and putting your own lens over it, because it's not always going to be right, but it is incredibly valuable in trying to come up to speed on how effective your product is in the market, where the market is moving. I find that incredibly valuable. When we exited Saylent, one of the things I was really conscious about in as I came back from my recharge was I didn't want to be labeled the fintech guy. And if I went back into fintech immediately, I was going to be the fintech guy. It's important for me in my own personal growth that I wanted to see new industries, see new markets, see new problems, not just continue to solve the same problem over and over in the same industry with the same players. And so I made a conscious effort with Curement and with everything that we're doing now, just to try and make sure that I broaden my own perspective. And that allows me now to see it and see all the patterns that exist across that. The problem sets tend to be very similar. The solutions may be different. The market may have nuances, but the problems are all the same. And so, and I think AI has been really valuable in that, and just helping me understand and get up to speed instead of what you used to do is, read a ton of books and, Google search your way through all the learnings and talk to everybody you possibly can. You still have to do some of those things, but it can synthesize data pretty well.
Absolutely. So tell me about your early days at Skidmore. I understand you were a basketball player.
I was.
How did that shape you, being a college athlete? How did that shape your leadership style and working with others and building some resilience and grit?
I think basketball is a core part of who I am, and it's always been. I try to remain active, remain playing. I coach, and I really enjoy staying connected to that. I think what you learn, and I'm a big believer that athletics and being an athlete and competing on your own and with teams is just a really valuable skill set and something that really helps you in business. So from that perspective, it has always been part of me. I think you learn what your role is. You learn how to work with others. You learn how to lead. You learn how to follow. And I, just at Skidmore, I was everything from a bench player and a reserve player to a key reserve player to a leading scorer to a captain. And so through my 4 years, my role changed year over year, and what I was asked to do changed. But, I think understanding where you are, what your role is in that organization, how you make them successful, how you work with others, how you motivate others, how you build culture and build on what you're trying to accomplish and doing it together. Some of my best moments were not always on the court. I probably remember, tell my teams this all the time, I probably remember 3 to 5 games in my career. But I have countless memories of my teammates, the bus rides, the dinners, the interaction,
the camaraderie.
And that's part of building a business, right? There isn't not everybody can be the leading scorer. Not everybody can, there are roles that you all play. And I think that taught me a lot about competing, overcoming adversity, working with different, characters and personalities, and trying to accomplish a singular goal with a team. That's been, really valuable to my business career.
Absolutely. Yeah. I share your experience. I played football in college, and I've pushed sports early on all my kids. I have 3 kids, and my oldest daughter plays volleyball in college, and she's entering her senior year, and she thought about giving it up because she's an ROTC as well, and for a time commitment, like, I'm entering my senior year, and I try to stress, I'm like, no, you have to see this through. Like, it's consistency. I know you may want to believe you would save time from practice to devote it in other areas. I said, but looking back, you're going to regret not finishing out your senior year. So I'm glad she's decided to finish her senior year.
Sports, for most of us, sports is a wonderful experience. It can be incredibly humbling. You have a lot of adversity. I remember my sophomore year, like I said, I didn't play a ton my freshman year, but in my sophomore year, we went overseas. I thought I played pretty well, and I thought I was going to come back and have a really impactful sophomore year. And I probably did in hindsight, but in the moment, it felt like, oh, geez, I should be getting more. I should be having more time, more shots, whatever it might be. And so I remember after my sophomore year, I walked into my coach's office, Coach Q at Skidmore. He's great. And I walked in. I said, I'm thinking about transferring. This is well before NIL transfer portals and anything.
Oh, that's a mess, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And he's like, okay, and he's like, I think you should stick it out, but I'm not gonna beg you to stay. And so overcoming that adversity, and then the next year, I think I had a really good year. We bonded. There were 3 of us that were sort of leading the team, and I think one of the challenges in today's society, not to get on my soapbox, is that it's too easy to quit and move to someplace else rather than fight through that adversity. I'm all for people getting paid and doing what they need to do, but sometimes you got to fight through it. And, there's a lot of business parallels to that. We can go through a lot of Saylent discussion about that. Founding a company and going through the journey is by no means a linear event. There's tons of hills and tons of valleys that you will go through. And if you're not used to fighting through that adversity and overcoming the obstacles in front of you, you will not be successful. It's never pure. It's never simple.
Right.
And so I think sports teaches you a lot about that.
Yeah. Does your kids play sports?
They do. Both of them do. My older one was a 3-sport athlete, probably more of a track and cross country than a basketball player, though she did play basketball. My youngest is really focused on basketball, has no interest in playing at the college level, which sometimes pains me, but as a parent, you just accept that. And I'm just happy that they find their own course. But one of the greatest times, I was an assistant coach with the school I coach with right now, where my oldest daughter was a starter and a senior, and my youngest daughter was an 8th grade and a starter as well. And so I got to have a unique experience as a parent where you got to coach them in the sport that you love and saw them have success in it. And I'll cherish that one. That's a great memory that I'll have for forever. So
right. Yeah. Were you recruited by other colleges other than Skidmore?
Would love to tell you yes. I was. I mean, I hurt my knee, not to make excuses. I hurt my knee junior year, 10 games in, did not blow out the ACL, but that ruined my junior season, a lot of the recruiting.
Is this high school?
This was high school.
Yeah.
And then so when I was a senior, I had some D3 offers and looks around, and Skidmore was the right fit with me. There were a couple other schools that I could have gone to and played. One of the things I prided myself on that I think is important and something I carry through today with my family and my friends, I just think it's important. One of the most valuable things I think I brought to the table is I think I've constantly improved through my athletic career, through my business career. That's the only thing that drives me. I want to continue to learn. I want to continue to get better. I want to learn from the mistakes that I have. And I never want to be complacent with where I'm at. And so I think seeing some of those things and I was proud of how I came on with not being a heavy recruiter to end as, the proverbial 1,000-point scorer. I got that milestone in college, which was a lot of fun.
Would you say it kind of put a chip on your shoulder a little bit to prove people wrong? Like, hey, I am a better player and let me show you.
Not as much as I think you'd think.
Mm-hmm.
I was more focused on trying to be the best version of me.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to check the ego at the door as best I can, although I certainly have one, and really enjoy the moment. I just wanted to continue to get better, and I wanted to beat whoever we were playing. I had a real competitive spirit and a drive and a need to win. And do everything I can to accomplish that goal. I was not too, I look back on it now and think to myself, boy, I probably could have done some other things if I really wanted to, or maybe pushed my athletic career to a D2 or probably a low D1. But Skidmore was a great fit for me. I really enjoyed the experience. And like I said, I think it shaped who I am today.
That's wonderful. Now, you grew up in the Boston area.
I did.
And you moved back to the Boston area after college.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been Boston, really born and bred for the most part. Lived there all of my life with my wife. I did have a short stint after college in New York City, but have worked and lived in Boston pretty much my whole time until we moved down to Raleigh in COVID time.
Yeah, Boston's such a wonderful city. It almost feels like a big neighborhood. Anywhere you go, the Back Bay or Cambridge or, down by the water. I mean, it's like, and people are generally warm and welcoming.
Yep.
The Italian district, I don't know, the North End, it's great food.
There's a lot of food there.
Yeah.
I love Boston. I appreciate the weather down here more than I appreciate the weather up there. I've gotten in my old age. I have no purpose for winter sports. I don't ski. I don't play hockey.
Are brutal.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I could live in Boston, except not in the wintertime. I don't think I could. I wouldn't like that. I mean,
I was, if we could design something, I'm okay with January and February being cold. It's cold down here. It's not as cold, but
right.
I'm okay with January and February. What I realized when I moved down here was I was pretty depressed in March, April, and early May. And the reason I associate that to Boston is I think there's always a 60-degree day sometime in late February, early March, where you think spring's upon you and the world is going to change and you can go golfing and boating or whatever you want to do outside. And then it's going to continue to snow on you for the next 2 months. And,
right.
And so March and April, I was like, aren't we done with this? Let's go. And then down here, March 1, it's spring, and you might have a cold day every now and again, but
right.
It's going to be
pretty
spring.
consistent.
Yes.
Yeah. My daughter attends WPI, Worcester Polytech.
Sure.
So we go up there a lot and see her. She plays volleyball there. And,
it's a great school, great.
Yeah.
There's a lot in that area.
Yeah. Surprisingly, Worcester's got like really good restaurants.
Yes.
There's a seafood place that she always wants to go when we go visit her, and it's like it's just awesome.
Oddly enough, I really do like Boston, like Massachusetts. Since we've moved down here, I don't think I've been back yet. Oddly enough, but
how long has that been?
5 years.
Okay. Well, you probably do.
Yes. Well, we don't have, we have friends up there, but our families, my family's not there. My wife's family's up there. We'd have not traveled back. She's gone back for some events that she had to go to, but
right.
We have not made it back there. And I think that's because we're happy in Raleigh, not because we were sad to,
right.
We obviously miss our friends there and miss our family, but we really enjoy where we're at.
So you're a big Red Sox fan, being a Boston native?
I would say I'm a bigger Celtics fan. I'm a little disappointed about the last night's outcome with the Knicks, but
right.
In order, I would say I'm Celtics, Patriots, probably Bruins, and then Red Sox.
Okay.
But everybody asks, well, what college do you root for or whatever? It's more of a pro town than it's a college town. So,
right. Yeah.
I have not. My allegiances now are to Carolina because that's where my oldest daughter goes.
Okay.
And we'll see where the youngest goes. We'll add that to the flag and go from there.
Yeah. Going to Fenway is an experience.
Yes,
I mean, I took some classes. Well, this executive ed program at Harvard, where it was in the fall, which fall time in Boston's phenomenal. Like the boat race on the Charles River, and it's iconic. You can't really describe it any better. But the cohort and I, there was a lot of guys that would like to go to the baseball games. We would always take the cab ride, metro, whatever, down to the Fenway and watch a baseball game. And every time we went to Fenway, we always sat next to someone who was super interesting and they had a story to tell. one night we were sitting with a bunch of rowdy guys from Southie, because
Sure.
They have their own unique
Yes, they do.
personality. And what was one of the comments I was talking about? So we were sitting there chit chatting with the guys, and they were buying us beers. We bought them beers, and it was good. So of course, like, where are you guys from? What are you doing in Boston? And we said, oh, we're taking an HBS course. We're here for 3 weeks. He's like, oh yeah, I go to Harvard every night. I deliver newspapers there. It's a dry sense of humor. But there was one time we went, and I was sitting next to a family, and it's guys very nice. Everybody starts talking. Hey, who are you? What's your name? Where are you from? Just want to know your background. And this guy starts talking about his kids, and he talked about his daughter. Said, oh, my daughter's fantastic. She's at Johns Hopkins. She's going to be a surgeon, and she's in med school, and blah, 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 blah. And he just goes on and on and on and on and on about his daughter. And I'm like, oh, well, what about your son? He goes, oh, that a-hole? He's sitting right over here, And then this kid like peeks around the side with his hat sideways, and he starts shaking his head because his dad's sitting there just railing him. He's sitting right next to him.
There is no shortage of characters in Boston, that's for sure. And while I say I don't follow the Sox much, there is a definitive experience to go to Fenway.
Right.
It is tremendous. If you haven't had the opportunity to go, I would encourage you to sit up on the wall seats. Those are phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a bad seat because you'll be behind a pole or turn the other way sometimes, but it is an experience. And so I always would go to 1 or 2 games a year just for that experience. We had the opportunity living in Fenway for a period of time, and that was great. We were walking distance to the stadium. One of the years they won the championship, they celebrated outside our apartment window at the time. And it's a very interesting community itself, just generally. And the characters, the people are always fun. So.
Have you been to Dropkick Murphy's concert there?
I have not. I've been to a number of concerts in the Fenway area. There's a couple of venues there, and the Dropkick Murphys are certainly popular with the Irish group, so the Irish community.
Yeah, they came to DC earlier this year. I went with a buddy to that
really?
concert. It was wild.
They get after it.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, very high energy.
Yes.
Yeah, upbeat. I told my daughter, I said, you should go to Fenway to the St. Patrick's Day concert, and she did, and her and some friends went. I'm like, oh, it was like, that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's some great stories there.
I understand every year CNBC always puts out this best state to work in for business, and North Carolina always ranks high on the list, if not one in the top 5. Did that have any insight or impact into your decision? I mean, why did North Carolina?
I would say you took into account that it was a good state for business. We were already doing business, so that was less of a factor, I would say, in the choice of why we moved here. I would say it was a little bit more lifestyle. There were a couple of requirements for us. We needed to be close to Boston, easy to return to the business when we did come back, whenever that might be from COVID. We needed some technology in case there were engineers or people comfortable with B2B SaaS and just the ecosystem that both we could connect with and potentially hire from. Financial services was important. So East Corridor, the Eastern Corridor was important to us. The weather in North Carolina was a nice selection. We didn't want anything to do with San Fran at the time. Austin, Texas was discussed. Atlanta was discussed. But ultimately it came down to North Carolina, and then looking at the various cities we could live here. And Raleigh just offered a different experience, I think, for us. I think Charlotte would have been, while not Boston, maybe closer to Boston. And Raleigh offered just a nice community for us to settle into. There were a lot of hopes and dreams about what it might be. You never know, because it was COVID, so we didn't have a great opportunity to experience what it was like until a couple of years after, I would say, we moved, where everything really started to settle down and back to normal, I would say. But we really enjoyed the experience. It's been a great thing for our family.
So you mentioned starting Saylent in 2006. So what was the item that pushed you? What was the aha moment that made you want to start your business?
Classic entrepreneurial story. I was at a conference in Vegas, and we had an opportunity, I thought, from all of my discussions. We were in the ATM field at the time, and we were selling originally to ISOs, which were independent deployers of ATM machines, and managing their business. And we converted and moved to expand our market to banks. And when we did that, we saw a very different mentality with the banks on our solution and what we could do. They viewed ATMs as cost centers, and while they were touch points with their customers, they were really trying to make it a low touch, very efficient distribution opportunity or channel for them. But they did have a revenue opportunity in cards and their debit and credit cards in particular. And so people had told us that for a long time. And so the aha moment was just a series of listening to what the market kept asking us for, and we couldn't deliver that. And so there was a gap. And when you started searching, there was a very apparent gap in analytics around card behavior. And so I drew on a napkin in a bar after a conference to one of the customers that I had sold to, saying, I think this is what you need. Does this align with that? They were very positive about it. Talked to another customer, they were positive about it. And so I flew home and woke my wife up out of a sleep. You come home in Vegas time, it's 11 o'clock if you leave early in the morning. Woke her up, said, I think we got an idea for something. What do you think? And she asked me to talk about it in the morning. We did, and at the end of the day, led to Saylent. And so I had always wanted to start a business. I'd always wanted to go through this experience. I didn't know what it was, and I promise you, when I thought about it, it was never going to be I was going to develop a banking, fintech solution. But I think if you listen to the market enough, the market tells you what they're looking for, where you'll see the gaps that are present, and they're not all home run ideas. They're not all billion-dollar unicorn companies. There's a lot of solutions that businesses need, and if you listen hard enough and you are, I think, bold enough to try and take the adventure on,
right?
That's how Saylent got started.
From that experience and the idea, how did that transition into a prototype? So you had a customer, you gave them a vision, and they're like, "Yeah, I'd love to use something like that." Did you develop this yourself? Did you hire a developer? From a technology point of view, how did you create this analytic engine?
Sure, that's probably the naiveness that I had of starting a business. I thought to myself, well, I'll just design what it should be, and then I'll hire somebody to help me build it, and off we go. Looking back on it, that's maybe somewhat foolish. But there was a lot of learnings because you're going into a highly regulated market in banking.
Right.
They don't love risk. So you have all of these factors that are driving against being an entrepreneur in banking. But the idea, I think, was strong enough to what we're doing. So this is one of the things I talk to a lot of founders about. You have to take your idea and then operationalize it. And that requires a set of rigor and discipline that not everybody has. It's pretty easy to talk about an idea. And so I've challenged, I think you learn a ton by putting business plans together and projections, right or wrong. The exercise to put it down on paper. Here's what we're going to build. Here's what we're going to go do. Here's how the business model is going to work. Here are the projections that come behind that. Here's what we're going to need to accomplish that. That rigor flushes out a lot of information and makes you make decisions along the way. And so back to your point, I went to work on writing a business plan, and I went to work on the product spec. And I said, this is what I think the market needs. I validated it with the customers that I had talked about and people I knew in the industry. I went through the whole, I incorporated, right? Started the business, got the legal fees done. And, some of those things are now a little easier than they were in the past. But I think we tried to set it up right from the beginning. We tried to go after it, and then we validated that. I actually was fortunate enough to get 2 customers to buy into it before we ever coded anything. And I promised them, I said, we'll build this. I would love your input. I'm a big believer in customer-driven and market-driven development. That is not to say you make custom software, but it does mean to allow some input from the people who are going to use this, that they're the ones that have the problem that you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had them sign. I hired a developer, and we went off and running. So I would say we incorporated in January or February 06. We probably had our first deal March or April of 06. I think I hired the developer in March of 06, I would say. And we bootstrapped it for 15 months. We paid the developer. We got to market later that year with our first sort of prototype, MVP. They liked it. They enjoyed it. They were super helpful in allowing us to build the business. I'll never forget the two customers that came in early. They were incredibly impactful. They stayed with us right to the end, which was great. And it was an incredible journey.
Your experience is very difficult to replicate. I mean, it's easy because like when we talk to kids at colleges, you know, because entrepreneurship and starting a business is huge. It's like the up and coming trend. Everyone must take an entrepreneurship class, and I mean, they have majors now of entrepreneurship. Like, how can you major in entrepreneurship? Like, it's a tool to process a methodology, but it's like, it's not a major. You need to focus on core engineering or accounting or business or medical or biology or chemistry, you know, just something core. And I always tell kids, go get experience, go learn how businesses run and how customers interact and what works, what doesn't work, and then seek out validation. Find a business need that's unmet. You know, a lot of kids come up with ideas and start pitching just off a PowerPoint. Oh, this is a good idea. Well, have you done the market analysis? Have you done the validation? Is there an unmet need? What's the competitive landscape look like? You know, so it's a good idea, but somebody already solved that, you know, so you have to do that type of research. And it sounds like you were very fortunate to be at the right place at the right time, and you uncovered a business need that was unserved. And in addition, you signed customers before you even had expenses. As in today, a lot of companies, you know, have expenses before they have customers. They don't mind the burn, and they get in trouble, and now they have to look for capital. And
you're speaking to a point that I talk about a lot, which is you can't dance. You can't do this part-time. You can't. I mean, we jumped in. Maybe you could argue, you know, without a parachute, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing either. But we fully committed into what was about to happen, and there wasn't. It was either going to be successful or it was going to fail, but it was going to do those two things on its own merits, not because I didn't put the time in appropriately, or I didn't go after it fully. And I think there's a lot of desire to not risk, to be an entrepreneur without the risk, which is not what entrepreneurism is. I mean, you have to be willing to fall and fail.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's a really important thing. I think it is. Again, I think you can do things on the side. I think not everybody is fortunate enough to be able to just quit and not have income and do that. I get all that. But and you can start the mechanics of a business on the side. You just can't run it. You know, it has to be from there to a proof point, and then that proof point has to lead to another proof point. And at some point in time, you're going to have to jump before anybody else is going to believe in it.
Did you keep your full-time job and work on this on the side? Or
I did not.
You quit your full-time job and you went all in. Did your wife continue to work her job? Did you have income?
She did not. We were, so this was December of 2005. We had the idea, said, I think we can do this. And in January, we started putting the mechanics of the business plan together and the product spec and the PowerPoints and, you know, all that kind of stuff. We did, we're fortunate enough to do a little bit of friends and family, put a little bit of money in just seed stuff to allow us to hire a developer. We put our own skin in the game, both monetarily and not being paid, right? So we got to a point where we could find somebody to build it. I'm not a technical resource. I think I understand how to build product. I think I understand how to build, you know, code. I couldn't do it myself, but I understand what is a good software product and what isn't. I wish I had those skills, to be fair, because that would be easier.
Well, you have a little time now, right?
I know. I should go after it.
Go back and get your doctorate. Yeah.
But it was. We fully committed. We were about to have our first child that following July. We built a house that was delivered in May. So,
okay, that's a huge risk. So you stopped work, you went all in on a business plan. Your wife's pregnant, you're about to have a kid, and you built a house.
Yes, there was a lot in 6 months.
Like, let's add a little more stress to you.
That's part of it. And I would say a little bit, part of that is good. I used to have a mentor of mine. He was the CEO of the ATM company that ultimately got sold to Jack Henry. And he would always tell me, you have to go and do it. And you just have to be willing to put it out there. And so we were really fortunate to be able to sort of make the decision to do it, and then to just be all in. Whether you do that again today, or what the different macro environment looks like, or micro for you. What is your current financial situation? But to me, it was about, there's an opportunity here. We're either going to make it work or not, but it's not going to be for a lack of effort.
What was your backup plan if this didn't work? Since neither one of you had income coming in, you had some expenses and some outlays coming ahead. Did you have a backup plan? Did you have a period of time, like, we're going to give this a run, but if we don't see traction or income by this date, I'm going to go back to work? Or what did it look like?
We did not have any of that. And it's interesting because it's one of the things I tell founders now about how they should start their own business, especially if they're going to bootstrap it and self-fund it for a period of time. Our backup plan was it would fail and I would go find a job. That's part of maybe the ego / confidence / cockiness, whatever is appropriate. To felt like I could have found a job again.
Yeah, because you worked in a very highly desirable sector that was growing and needed people like yourself. So you felt confident enough that if it didn't work out, I can enter back into the workforce pretty easily.
Yes. And I was fortunate enough, and I mentioned that I tell founders this today, it's pretty easy to die from 1,000 cuts if you just, if you don't watch and really validate, are you getting traction on your story? Are you getting the proof points along the way that suggest you should continue? I think we had always had that. So I never had to step back and question, is this right? Do people want it? The market was showing us they wanted it. I think because it was rooted in feedback from the market at its nascency, right? We knew that the market had this problem. We just had to build it faster than anybody else. And so we continued to have proof points along the way. But if you're coming up with an idea that hasn't been vetted or hasn't had that same feedback from the market, founders are incredibly scared sometimes to be vulnerable with their idea to the people they're trying to sell to. I'm sure for all the same thing, nobody wants to be told their idea is no good, or they're not going to buy it, or somebody else did that. Those are difficult things to hear, and it's hard not to be defensive when somebody says that to you. So, but it's really important. You have to be able to be the leader of the business and realize that maybe what you're leading isn't what people want. And so in a founder situation, I now tell a lot of founders, if you're funding this on your own and you're doing this, I would advise you to treat yourself as a VC or an investor into your business. Come up with a dollar amount, whatever it is, include your salary that you're not going to be making what you would normally make in a market. And put that in and said, I'm going to invest 50, 100, 200,000, whatever the right number is. If you take loans and things like that, those are important elements for you to have a discussion with, your friends, your co-founders, your spouse, partner, whatever it might be, because it will then tell you when you run out of money, which inevitably you probably will, then you can validate, have I made enough proof to where I would invest again? And if you have, invest more. And if you haven't, then maybe it's not the right idea.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right.
One of the things, I heard this at a conference, I want to say last year, it might have been the Grappapalooza conference, or it might even have been CED's Venture Connect. I can't remember which one it was. But there was a VC that had talked about COVID actually hurt a lot of founding businesses because there was so much money around, and maybe rational or irrational excuses to why you need money, because the world shut down and everything changed, that it limited business failures in a normal business cycle. And so you didn't have the normal run of people starting businesses, some being successful, some raising money, and some failing. There were a lot of businesses that sort of were zombie businesses that stayed around and probably shouldn't have. And because there was money to just keep investing into the problem. And I think we're out of that now, but that still has a little bit of a drag on, I think, the normal startup ecosystem of find an idea, try and get it funded, try and build it, be successful or fail and move on. Every success and every failure causes you to have to reevaluate. Your question earlier about what's my plan B. Well, my plan B could have been another idea. But if I feel like this idea is still hanging on, I'm more willing to put time into that. And so I think it's just important, because you will invest more than you think. It will take longer than you think. It will be slower than you think, 9 times out of 10. And that's okay. That's part of the process. But boy, it can really, you can look back and say, I invested a ton of money in this and it never really worked.
Right.
If you're not constantly evaluating, am I getting enough traction? It's a big word for me, right? You got to prove that people want what you're doing. And that's the goal.
So how long did it take for you to get some solid traction? I know you had 2 customers, and then you started to actually develop the application. I assume you used Hadoop technologies?
Did not. We built it in SQL. We built in .NET. That was what the technology I was comfortable with in the prior. That was where the developer came from. That was his comfort. Open source was just starting in banking. Banking's 5 or 10 years behind a normal curve just because of the regulatory environment. So open source was not going to get widely accepted.
Right.
We did not do Hadoop, but we were in SQL. We built it to answer your question. We had a 15-month bootstrap sort of mentality. So from January of 06 to March of 07, we were funded on friends and family and our own money, in our own time. We had the 2 customers. We went to a conference later that year in November, got some real good success and interest from customers. I talked to Jack Henry, was a big customer of ours, the company that acquired the prior company. So I maintained all those relationships that I had, but we had continued to see traction through our life, enough that we could go to the investment community or the investor community and the VCs and say, we think we have an idea. Here's what we're going to go try and build. We were fortunate enough to find a great investor that backed the early round. Our first safes weren't big then. Convertible notes were, but safes weren't really popular. It was, you were going to do a seed or a Series A. We did a Series A, $1.5 million, led by a great investor in the North with half the check. And that's the most important thing. You've got to find the first person who's going to put their name down and said, I'll invest this if you can get to this number, and be the anchor for the round.
So that, you said $1.5 million? $1.5 million. What valuation did they give you at the time?
Oh, that's a great question. I can't even remember. It was low.
Like
low single digits, I mean, 5 to 7 kind of thing.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Especially if you're pre-revenue, or barely breaking revenue. Yeah.
We had some good opportunities and partnerships ahead of us. We had revenue coming, and so that was the model. We were going to go direct to banks. That was how we started. We had proven it out. At least in the early stages, again, with people saying they're willing to buy it, they're willing to contribute to it, they see the value. And so we had always had traction throughout. But the first capital raised really allowed us to think about the business more holistically and with greater intent for the future. Now we can start talking about how do you build a development team? How do you think about a sales engine?
Right.
How do you, this is where, coming back to basketball, this is where just working with people and motivating and you're selling. In everything you're doing, you're selling. You're selling a product, you're selling a business, you're selling yourself, you're selling the vision. And so to get people to come on board and join the vision was a lot of fun. There were a lot of yeses and nos, and both were helpful. But I couldn't have been happier with the team that we had built.
So it was a .NET architecture, MS SQL Server in the back end. Did you have to acquire your own servers? Like where did the data reside in the application?
To begin with, yes.
Yeah.
Because again, this was a little before cloud started to be adopted.
Right, yeah,
so
yeah.
I think we had found somebody who were selling servers on the side. And so we bought these rack servers and
You set this up in your basement?
set it up at the time, set it up in like the closet of an office.
Okay,
I mean, it's classic. It wasn't our garage, but it felt like it at times. It was in a bank building, and we just had a whole bunch of servers lying on the tables, no rack because we couldn't afford the rack. So
Right.
we started building it on that. And the model when we first started was we would deploy it in their environment. And it was fine. They adopted it. But then October 2007 happened when Lehman went down. You saw the financial crash coming.
I remember.
The recession. Everybody remembered that there was no money in the banking system. And so as a startup, we had just taken money, which was the only reason we survived because we could pivot a little bit. And we started to say to ourselves, we're not going to be able to get, $50,000, $100,000 checks, whatever it might be, from banks. They had no ability to sign off on that. And so we looked at the market, and we were getting some interest from what I would just loosely call payment processors, people who run and approve the transactions on behalf of the individual banks and cardholders. And so there's a handful of them in the market. There were probably 40 or 50 at the time, since consolidated. And we were getting some traction there. And so we said to ourselves, okay, we have to scale this thing up, make it multi-tenant, make it a SaaS delivery model. And so our model was, we made a pivot from, instead of being a Saylent-driven product, we were going to create loosely distribution channel arrangements where we would pre-integrate with the payment process, which was the source of data we needed in order to be beneficial for the individual banks, and go through a white label powered by Saylent model. And that happened really from October 2007 to, I would say, early mid 2008. We had made the shift. We had 2 payment processors on board, and that became our business model. It was not the way I wanted to go to market with it. It wasn't how it was supposed to go, if you will, from the business plan. The product was the same, but the revenue cycle, delivery management, sales cycle, we essentially offloaded all first line sales and support to these partnership arrangements. And we were second line sales support, second line tech support. But we got to get out of individual bank by bank selling that would have asked for $15,000 to $25,000 in an implementation fee, X amount in an annual license, and an ongoing maintenance, to you can have it for $1,000 a month or whatever the right number was. And to use that, it just opened up the gates, because there's revenue in managing their cardholder behavior for them. And there's a need to understand customer behavior from a banking perspective. They just couldn't afford the price tag. And so it was a question of, how do you shift your go-to-market to adapt to what was, at that time, a new world with a lot of uncertainty into it. And so we kept growing through the recession, which was great. Allowed us to really accelerate in that model. We sold a number of other processors, large companies that wanted to deliver this to their customers. And so it was an interesting evolution of the business.
Were you only selling the product or the software as an annual license, or did you have services attached to it where they were paying you by the hour to?
When we started, it was all license and software costs. And when we moved to the SaaS model, it was a a very simple, per user
Mm-hmm.
subscription fee.
Mm-hmm.
Later in our time, we started in the payment analytics. We had by the end of it, had built 2 other products. So we had 3 products in the market. One that was very payment analytics centric that we started with. One that was more a rewards checking or a relationship rewards sort of model. We could lever the relationship in certain ways. And the third was maybe a combination of the both and more of a customer engagement platform.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started to get to the latter years, we did start to offer marketing services that we would improve upon the information that they had. We would prepackage these programs for them and let them sign in so that they could check a box that they were moving the needle from a customer perspective. And those were just learnings that we had never thought about when we first started. But again, the market kept saying, "Hey, why don't we run a joint program across multiple regions and multiple banks and just swap logos and images and the like?" And we had all the data with which to do so. There's an interesting balance when you do that, because now you're moving a little bit from a pure software company with great gross margins and all that good stuff to a little bit of a services business. And there's a really interesting balance as you think about valuations and how you go to market. Not getting too weighted in that was an important characteristic or concern of ours as we were built in the business. But ultimately it worked out. And there was a lot of learnings in that that I think we'll get into maybe a little later, but really moving from a software provider to being the expert on what they should do. And that evolution's a pretty interesting one.
How large was your team?
I think at our peak, we got up to about a little shy of 50 people. We were pretty capital efficient. We only ever raised about $6.5 million. We got it at exit to around 10 million in ARR and about $1 million, $1.5 million in EBITDA, somewhere in that range. I would say we were optimally sized around 30.
Okay.
That's where we probably should have been. That's one of the challenges when you start taking money and you think about growth plans is there is a tendency to overhire or be more aggressive than maybe you should and what the fundamentals of the business would suggest.
Were most of these customer support engineers or like help desk?
I would say we did a pretty good job. The system had a lot of functionality into it that we didn't have to spend a tremendous amount of time in the support and training side of the house. That we certainly had customer success. I would say the 2 groups that we had obviously a pretty heavy engineering team. We built it all here. We didn't offshore any of it. And so our engineers built a lot of it. And we had sales and relationship managers. Because we were managing through those channels, we were able to be more efficient with our resources. So we didn't have to support 1,000 financial institutions. We had to support 5, 6, 7 processors at the time and help them and their sales team be effective to their customers.
I know you talked about bringing some venture capitalists into your business, raising some money. How integrated were they in helping you with customer acquisition and helping you with the day-to-day business operations?
The loaded question. They were tremendous supporters of the business. They did, I think, everything they could to make connections, but they were financial investors, most of them. And I would say they allowed us to be operators. So they were impactful in creating relationships and helping us think through the problem. They probably didn't make as many connections as anybody would like to just continue to penetrate and gain adoption in the market. But I couldn't have done it without them. We had a great board. We had a great group of investors. They allowed me to make mistakes and helped me guide through the challenges of being a first-time entrepreneur and going through multiple cycles. What takes you from 0 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 10 they're just very different needs. And I wasn't perfect in any of that, but I had a great team. We had brought on a great group of people, and I think they were very supportive in trying to teach, impart their wisdom to me on what they've seen be successful in other industries. Then it was sort of on us and the team. How could we take that information into our industry, into this market and these products and not make that mistake? And it's not always the same solution,
Mm-hmm.
but the problem set that you see was very helpful to get that information ahead of time.
Who were your VCs, if you can name them?
Our VCs, the lead venture capital group to start was Venture Capital Fund of New England.
Mm-hmm.
We had then had another early stage, it was called Seed Ventures. They were a Southeast Massachusetts development organization that was actually funded by a lot of banks,
Mm-hmm.
but had a very Massachusetts-centric growth model when they invested in us, and economic development model. So they were in it. Outcome Capital, 5 Elms, Brett Rome and that group came out of Capital One venture arm. Those were the primary VCs that were in it. There were 5 or so.
Did they influence your decision to sell the business? Like, walk me through the process of when you decided, hey, now's the time, we need to think about exiting.
At a board level, after about year 8, it was probably a pretty constant drum at the board level of what should we do? When's our exit horizon? We were actually pretty close to taking it out in 2014. Hiring a banker. We had actually interviewed a number of different bankers to take us to market. We had selected it. We were preparing the SIM, getting ready to go to market, had the plan. And we had 2 pretty impactful customer attritions that we had to deal with. And they were partner attritions more than customer attritions. And so
churn, basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
that created a real obstacle in the business.
How much revenue did that impact you?
Probably $1.5 million to $2 million of our
over 10. So you're talking about 15%.
Yes.
Okay.
And at the time, it was probably even more impactful. It was probably closer to 20% of the business.
What was the reasons for the customer churn?
One was an expected one that I think we could have done. They just didn't renew. They were on an older model where it was a license and maintenance. They were in a maintenance mode. Their business model had shifted, so they were going to go into maintenance only.
Okay.
And we could have survived that one. The other one was a evolution of our customer. They had hired multiple people to fill the same role. And so the person who had purchased or signed the relationship with us was now no longer there. We had a new person come in with different ideas, different thoughts about where they wanted to put their money. And so they decided to break their contract. They probably didn't have rights to, but unfortunately, to go after them, the money associated with that, the time associated was likely not going to happen. And so we let them break the contract, but that had a material impact on the business. And so we had to really think about, okay, what is our next evolution? At the time we had 2 products, and that was a real, come to Jesus moment. What are you going to do? That is the valley, right? And there was a lot of low points in that, especially as you thought about what was going to be a pretty good high. We were on a good growth trajectory. You could see at the time, like I said, I think we were 7 or 8 million. You could see 10 coming just in normal course. And so it felt like the right time to take it to market. And we knew we couldn't. And so now it's like, okay, well, not only that, now we're at 6 million or whatever the number was instead of 8. What are we going to do? At the time, the business was in a suburb of Boston, Franklin, Massachusetts at the time. And we said, we've really got to retool this business a little bit if we're going to get back on the right growth trajectory. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about what that was. We decided ultimately that we needed to sort of do a little bit of an overhaul of the business. We needed to think about it differently. We needed to act differently. We moved from Franklin to downtown Boston. We had some employee churn as a result of that. We hired some new employees coming in. There were a lot of great people who stayed with us, but we got to reinvigorate our culture. We got to reinvigorate the vision of what we're going to try and do. And we started crafting our next product, which was the combination of the 2 we had. We felt like through the business, there was a focus on providing tools to bankers to do their job. What we started to learn at the end of it was that we had seen more than everybody else had seen. So instead of one bank's view of what it was, we saw 1,000 banks' view of what should happen. And we had done it enough. And so we said to ourselves, let's stop asking and providing tool sets with the idea that they're going to take it forward. Let's start being more prescriptive into what they should do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we developed a third product that took all the same data streams that we had, took a lot of the same tools that we had, but we packaged it in a way that told the bank, here's what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in driving auto loans, here are 1,000 customers who, based on their behavior profiles, likely need a car loan.
Mm-hmm.
Here are people who just moved now at a risk of leaving you, and you should probably reach out to them about your, branchless environment.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it might be, we were very prescriptive, including the return models, the marketing campaigns. And so we were trying to identify need, risk, or opportunity from the data that we had,
Mm-hmm.
and then recommend the behavior change, the change of behavior campaigns
Mm-hmm.
that would allow for a return and a lift in the performance. And we got to see, because we had all the data, all the ancillary impacts to those campaigns. We allowed to very easily sort of correlate the impact of that. And that put us on another growth trajectory that ultimately led to the exit.
Mm-hmm.
And so when COVID came, there was a lot of everybody trying to figure out, the 2 weeks to slow the spread and what that really meant,
Mm-hmm.
and allowed us to say, what's this world going to be like? And unlike the recession, became very advantageous to the banking community. There was just a ton of money in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it was talking about, in a completely sort of distant world at the time, how do you stay connected to your customers?
Mm-hmm.
That was a core sort of point that we were sort of picking at. And so we started to continue to see more and more traction out of that. That was around the same time we decided to move down. And so when we decided to move down to Raleigh, I was driving our cars down, and I got a call in from a PE-backed strategic saying, hey, we think we should combine the businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Are you interested? And so we danced with them for a little while, and there's a whole nother story that comes from that. But that's how it all started. So it had been a constant drum since, I would say, year 7, year 8.
Okay.
Then there was a recognition that it wasn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question was, okay, how do we get back to that? The investors, again, were very supportive. We had enough cash to operate. We were operating within our own means at that point in time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't suggest we were wildly profitable, but we weren't burning cash either.
Right.
And so the question became, okay, well, how are we going to change? How are we going to adapt to what is the new world?
Mm-hmm.
And so we put it on a different trajectory.
So you didn't hire a banker per se. You did at one point, and you thought about chopping it, and then you had a little bit of a setback.
Yep.
And then you decided, you know what, we're not selling. We're going to double down, reinvent the culture, move offices, and kind of like, we're here for the long haul. And so somebody reached out to you several years later. You said private equity?
Yes, a PE-backed strategic,
Mm-hmm.
West Coast. They wanted the business. And I thought the thesis made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were in the business at that time, 14-ish years.
Mm-hmm.
The investors, while patient, don't have unlimited patience.
Right.
And so we knew we had to get to a liquidity event. And so we danced, I would say, with that particular firm. And what's interesting, and there's a lot of learnings from this, when you're in a process to sell, whether it's an inbound bid or you're running a process with a banker,
Mm-hmm.
there's just natural momentum that builds
Mm-hmm.
internally in yourself. For those that are in the know, but certainly at the board level, there's this momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I do think there are firms that, legitimately retrade for the right reasons. Then there are firms that I would say legitimately don't retrade for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we were in a spot where I didn't feel like we had any reason to retrade. We were a better company when they started. Everything we had told them was true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the board and said, I do not think we should accept this retrade of the offer. I think what we should do is reject the offer, hire a banker, and go to market. And so the board supported that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now, we moved down July of 2020. This is now probably September.
Mm-hmm.
September, I reached out to banker firms that I had known previously, found a great banker in Leonis and Partners in New York that took us to market, and we ran a picture perfect sort of as they draw it up for you process.
Was it an auction or strategic?
We were running two sides of it. We ran a dual process. We were predominantly asking for an exit. We also indicated we'd be okay with a growth investment as long as they allowed some secondary to go out. And so we had, did a preview of it in the late December timeframe, getting ready for Q1. The goal was to try and get a couple of strategics really interested early. We did that. Another PE-backed strategic came in Toma-backed strategic called Meridian Link came in later, and we signed an IOI or an LOI in late February.
Okay.
And the deal was closed April of 21 or March 31st of 21.
So it took almost a year for due diligence to go through that process.
No, I would say the whole process when I moved down July of 2020, being in an exit mode or mentality was probably 9 months.
Okay.
The actual process took 3 months.
Okay.
And I would say we were 45 days, which is pretty fast. We were 45 days from IOI to close.
I'm sorry. I thought you signed the LOI in 2020 and closed the deal in 21.
No. We signed LOI February of 21 and we closed it March 31st of 21.
That is impressive. I've never heard anybody closing a deal that fast.
It was quick. And I give a lot of credit to our CFO, Bill Rooney. I think the way we built the organization, we didn't have a lot of skeletons in the closet. We were pretty solid, fundamental business that had our ducks in order.
Right.
The due diligence process is not for the faint of heart.
Right.
There's a lot in it. You have to be ready for it. It is, for any founder starting something, it's good to start early with the right mechanics, the right documentation, the right model, because it's going to come back at you.
I tell any founder who's interested in M&A, either on the buy or sell side, is to get an advisor, either on the board or your board of advisors, whatever, and that's had experience in M&A, because that's a whole art in itself. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's a lot in it, right? There's both momentum and interest from everybody else to get to an exit. That it means a lot to the funds. It means a lot to the founders. It means a lot to employees. It means a lot to the acquiring company, usually. And you go through those things. It is a process. It takes a lot out of you. You will be very distracted. It will take a lot of time, no matter how prepared you are. But we always when we took money, we knew what the plan was. The whole thesis of the business was we were going to build it up and sell it. So that mindset already existed. And so we tried to put everything in place where we could reach that. And I think, we were fortunate enough to go through that successfully. And one of the things I think I'm proudest about just at Saylent in particular was most transactions don't have a win on all sides. Usually somebody's losing. You obviously want everybody to win, but the likelihood is there's somebody who's not going to be happy. I feel like we tried to, I feel like we accomplished it where the acquirer got the product and the team that they wanted. The team got both some liquidity as well as, a future at the new company. The investors all received good returns. The founders received good returns, and we all felt good about it. The product's still in market today. The team is still active at that doesn't happen a lot.
Well, that's a great success story, because I think the statistic is 85% of all deals fail post transaction. Just transitioning into a new culture, new brand, new direction, new leadership, new management. Sometimes it doesn't take. So it's a testament to your own leadership and your ability to transition your company with the strategic buyer and still keep the band together, because there's many that fail at that. That's good.
Yeah. And I wish I could take a lot of credit for it. I think I got better over the time at Saylent of recognizing that it was going to be the team that was going to be successful and the group that we brought in. Russ Predator, our sales, Bill Rooney, Joe Myrn, Chris Fahey, Lauren Snow, a bunch of people there that were just very valuable to the process. And it is ingrained in me now that, you need to find those people who are going to see what you're trying to do and help you do it. And, there were new people along the way. Some of our more recent hires, Laura Costello, she's now over there in a marketing role, just constantly improving what happens and trying to be the best that the company can be, because there's no chance you're doing this on your own. It just doesn't happen.
Right. Was the process of selling emotional for you? Because most founders go through a bit of heartbreak. It's sort of like selling your child.
Yeah, my baby founder. I was never one of those.
Okay.
To be fair.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I always felt like, and this comes to maybe another learning from basketball or coaching or whatever. My view of success has changed over time. I used to think success was you just go win or whatever that might work out to be. I think success at the moment is about maximizing the opportunity in front of you. And if you can maximize everything in front of you, you've done your job, and that's success. Because not every team's going to win a championship. Not every company's going to be Google or Uber or whatever other company, NVIDIA, right? Some of them, the model isn't there for that. But that doesn't mean you can't be extremely successful in your own right. And so you have to be able to look at the people you have, the market you're serving. What is the best this company can be? And if you can approach that or exceed that, I think that is success. Try not to get too focused on, am I a unicorn or am I on the tweener fund? And I think the tweener fund's great, but just build a great company. Build a great company that people want to be a part of, that people want to buy, and make sure you're as successful as you can be with that. Because otherwise you just set yourself up for disappointment in everything, right? And so what Curement was going to be, what Rubrik was going to be, what the next company will be, they're all individual in nature. And so you have to be able to look at where are we and what does success from this point look like? And I think that allows you to carry great focus on what your job is and what teams you're going to put in and how big you're going to get and how much money you need, and all those things play in.
How long did you stay on with Saylent after the transaction?
0 days. Oddly enough, 0 days. It was actually quite jarring, to be fair. They were about to go public. They needed our product. They wanted our product. It was good for their story. It was a good revenue add for them. But they needed to meet a certain, pro forma into the market.
Right.
They had already had a founder who was sort of in the chief strategy officer kind of role. So they didn't need me, and I frankly was okay with going and recharging a bit.
Okay.
So there were only 3 people that left the company: myself, the CFO, and our HR. And to be fair, in every company, the CFO and HR are pretty normally part of an exit and not moving on. Doesn't always happen, but those are pretty common. And everybody else remained. And so I remember we closed it, I think, like I said, we signed it on April 1st. And so that was a Thursday, if memory serves me right. And Friday, I went up to check my email, and I couldn't get into my email.
Wow, it was pretty quick.
Yes, it was. It's very jarring because as a founder, your whole life is in your work. All your personal contacts, all of your emails, they're just, nobody used my Gmail account. They just used Saylent.
Right.
And so not having access to that, I remember I walked up, I couldn't get in. I walked down, I said, I guess that's it. And so I don't know what I did at that point in time, but I looked at my wife and said, I have no idea what I'm going to do right now, but I know I'm not going to work because they don't want me to work. So that was the beginning of the next phase of life, of trying to figure out what to do. Because I had been in a market now for 9 months that I had really very little connectivity into. I knew I wasn't ready to be connected or to help anybody yet. I needed my own downtime. And so that was part of, okay, well, what do we do now?
Right. So what are you doing now?
Well, so that lasted probably a year and change.
So you took some time off, like you were just completely unplugged.
I golfed. I tried to. We didn't do as many vacations. We still had the kids in school. You know, we ended up spending some time at Lake Gaston. You know, touring the area, all that kind of stuff. But I would say I came back about 12 to 15 months later.
Okay.
And said, I really want to get connected into this ecosystem. I don't know anybody here. Nobody knows me. Let's spend some time meeting people. And so I was trying to be pretty methodical of who I went. I talked to just the CEDs of the world, NC Idea, the local VCs, the local lawyers, the different pockets of people. Just, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee. Oddly enough, everybody was raising funds, so they were very happy to talk to me about a number of things. I didn't probably appreciate that when I first started doing it, but now I do. And so started mentoring some companies. CE does a great grow program for those that are interested. They do a 12-week kind of incubator-ish style group. There's a lot of studios that do some things. But I just started getting back to having cups of coffee and meeting different entrepreneurs and people along the journey, including the schools and their entrepreneurship groups. And I think through that, as much as I enjoyed it from the fill your cup model and the pay it forward model, I did start to get the itch to operate again and wanted to be back into it. I tell people I know what it takes now, so I didn't have an idea that I said to myself, oh, that's an idea I'm super passionate about. Let's go do that and go through all the pain that I'm well aware of about to happen. But I do want to get back in, and I do want to figure out ways to help companies, whether it be as an operator or a board member or whatever, or just a friend that they can, bounce stuff off of. And so I tried to do all of that for a period of time, and then that led me to Curement. And I think at the time I had met one of the investors in the business. At the same time, the founder and the founders, both great guys, were starting to evaluate what their next cycle was and how do they grow the business. And I think there was some realization, or at least some openness to saying maybe I could be more valuable in different parts of the business. And so the investor connected me with the founders and ultimately led to me joining Curement on a pretty specific mission, I would say, to try and help them along in that path. And so that was now, call it September of 23. I joined them.
And you're still active there?
I'm not. The goal was pretty simple. We had to refocus what the business was going to do. We needed to set it on a growth trajectory, and we needed to try and raise capital or exit. One of those two had to happen. And so we put together a story. We had a great investor community in the business already. We had leaned on them and said we need some operating capital to execute our vision. I think we did a really good job. The two founders, Brandon McCarty and Chris Rathgeb. Brandon was the CEO. Chris was the technical lead and CTO. Both brilliant guys. They moved, Brandon moved into more of the product-centric role. And we just started crafting our vision to try and take them from a procurement company to a procure-to-pay company, where we started both seeing the purchases and the payables and invoicing side of the house. And we served dental organizations, what are called DSOs, but the roll-ups of all these mom-and-pop kind of dentists or the retail fronts. And they had a lot of problems trying to control the spend. There's a lot of spend in dentistry and what you have to do for all of the production that comes. And so we were sort of the back end office for that. And so we put that together. We saw some really good traction. We moved the customer mix and the revenue mix from a procurement only play. When we started, was probably 15% of our mix from a procure to play side to a 65% mix at the end. We had good momentum behind us. And so we reached about the middle of the year of 24, said this is the time we've got to go to market and see if we can either get capital to finish the story, this journey of it, or find somebody who would be a good partner and a good home for it going forward. I think we would have been super successful if we had raised capital. I think one of the learnings, there was a mismatch in what our scale was versus what investment dollar amount we had taken in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a little in between rounds. And so there was some difficulty in getting people on board with that. And so we ultimately found a home for it, and sold it to what was our largest competitor,
Mm-hmm.
And closed that transaction in February of 25.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple months ago. They're still in the transition part of it,
Mm-hmm.
moving the business over and converting the customers. I think it's going really well.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a different process. We didn't hire a banker. It couldn't support it. I ran really the banking side of it. We talked to a lot of people, but this was the right place for the business to end up.
Now, have you ventured into being an angel investor? Have you invested in any startups?
I have not yet.
Okay.
My wife and I have talked about it a lot. We've talked about it with a number of funds. The way I look at it right now is I'm still in my operator mode.
Right.
I think I don't know if I'd be a great investor yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm pretty interested in continuing the operator cycle for a little while. I do think there'll be a time it moves to being more of an investor, whether it be an angel or fund specific. I'm not sure yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoy operating at the moment.
Well, I will tell you, an operator investor, they're highly desired, because most founders I talk to that have taken capital from VCs, their biggest complaint is that the VC doesn't really understand their business model, or they don't understand what it takes to run a business. They have no experience sitting in the driver's seat of the day-to-day ops. So being an operator that can pivot into being an investor, you can jump into those companies and really give them some good down-to-earth experience and advice that, hey, you know what, I've run payroll. I know what it takes to, lean your house and do this. And, I mean, it's a different experience than running from an Excel spreadsheet. So I think you would be a great investor with a lot of great experience, not only from operations, but from M&A.
Well, I appreciate that. I enjoy it. I enjoy being involved in it. I think that was one of the things I really liked about the Rubrik experiences. I did get a chance to sit on the board there and was an independent when they took in some capital from Jurassic Capital.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked really, really hard at being the type of board member that I wanted as part of my board.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure I knew the product, knew the challenges, knew the team, that I dug in enough to the market to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get in the weeds and try and get myself into being an operator for them, but to start helping them out with, hey, this is the next thing you're going to see. This is I've seen this problem before, and what it sounds like is, maybe it's a people problem or a talent problem or just a customer problem, whatever it might be. And just trying to be the board member I wanted from my board. Right. And, I'm sure times I did that well, and then I'm sure times I didn't, but I tried to be that person.
Sure.
It is interesting when you see these things from different perspectives, now different industries, right? I was an early stage employee. I founded a company with my wife. I joined a company that was already founded and come in as a, sort of an external CEO, been a board member. The problems and the patterns you see are pretty similar. The solution may not be identical, but pattern recognition about what's going on is real. And I think that's an important, that's a value, I think, that is inherent in just having gone through it. I remember I was talking about this with the Rubrik CEO, Nate, and we were just sort of talking about how much we didn't know when we started and what now seems sort of natural. You wake up and you're like, well, okay, this is what that means. Boy, that was a bad decision. I don't know why I made that decision in year 3, right? That now I would never have made that decision, but you have to go through it to experience it. And
right.
There's a lot there, which again goes back to, I'll make coffee for anybody as much as I can, because I just think there's so much there that you learn over time that is valuable to somebody trying to start their business.
Absolutely. So now that you had time to reflect on your journey from early times, working, starting your own business, going through the scaling, pivoting through struggles, seeing your market basically get devoured,
Yep.
having to reinvent yourself, and then successfully exiting, what are a few things that you wish you could do that you didn't do? Like looking back, it could have been better, or maybe I made a mistake. Like what are some things that you, if you had that chance to go back in time, you would unwind some of these decisions?
I would say there's probably not enough time in this podcast to hit them, but
just a couple.
there's a couple of really sort of meaningful ones, I suppose. The first was, I'm a believer, like I've never bootstrapped a business from nothing to wherever, right? I bootstrapped it for a period of time, but never made it without money. So a lot of my experiences come from that. And I view capital to be incredibly valuable. And the old adage that everybody says, you should take as much money as you can when you don't need it versus when you do. That is a true statement. There's a lot in that though, because we took fewer than we should have from we closed a Series C at one point in time, a small Series C. Later in our life, this was probably 2013, 2014. And we had gotten some bites externally, which can be the worst thing for an investor, or for a founder to hear, and an investor for that matter. And so we got a little enamored that something might happen. Anyway, we were raising a $4 million round. We decided to take 2. And that decision definitely impacted our ability to be successful on the thesis that we were raising money on.
Mm-hmm.
If we had more money, we would have been able to last and finish the vision of what we're trying to do. And I just, that is in my mind pretty consistently. I think this market tends to underfund businesses. I know there's a theory at the moment around just fund to certain stages and fund to the next growth curve. And I agree with all that. But there is a point in time where when you are taking capital, founders get a little too sensitive on dilution. 20% of 0 is still 0, right? 40% of 0 is still 0. And so, take what you need to be successful. And if you are successful, the extra capital or the extra dilution that you took will make itself okay. You will be comfortable with that at some point in time. If you take less and fail, you will regret that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say properly funding the business on what the business needs, instead of a really optimistic view of like the least amount you could raise, is maybe a learning.
Okay.
The other one that was there was just trying to navigate the team dynamics over time and recognizing when somebody is a great person for the 0 to 2 journey, but maybe not the perfect person from the 5 to 10 journey, is a really hard thing, because you create relationships with people. But it's the same reason in the NBA, if we go back to basketball, that, you'll trade, an up and coming superstar and a draft pick for somebody who's done it before. Like, there are reasons that those people are there. Mm-hmm. and seeing it and having done it is a valuable experience. I think that's another one. Trying to find out when you should delegate and when you should be beginning to let the reins go and empower the team behind you, and doing it yourself. And I've made a ton of mistakes in that. And my team every now and again used to call me the fireman, right? Like, I'd go around to fire over fire, and I thought I was doing a great job at just solving all these problems, but I didn't do a great job. I was actually a tornado coming in. And so learning when I need to have guidance and oversight and leadership versus doing is a real challenge for, I think, a lot of founders. You need a great team behind you, and you need to trust that team that you build. And there are things that need your attention. I never forget a comment from one of my investors. They said, I don't think a founder or a CEO should ever delegate the vision. Mm-hmm. But where you're trying to go can be influenced by people, but like, it needs to be what you believe in.
Right.
And so those missteps through the course of time are just they're not things that hurt you. Individual items, they won't, but a series of them will build up and become impactful. And so learning how to dance on that and learning when you should be involved and when you shouldn't is a challenge. And you can do it wrong at both levels, right? You can be too involved and too involved too late, or too involved too early. I mean, it's just, they're all problems.
Right. Well, sounds like you have some really great experience, and I hope that you find some success getting on boards and being a mentor to a lot of the startups here in Wilmington and Raleigh and other places. If there's anything I can do to help, even with kind of touching into the venture capital side, I've learned a lot doing that. So if there's anything I can do to help kind of navigate you, I think you'd be an awesome investor.
Thank you. It's a whole different world. It's an interesting evolution, but this market is a great market. I think they've got we got a lot of really smart people, and I think some driven entrepreneurs that sometimes they just need a little bit of help, and sometimes they just need a voice to bounce things off of. And so I really do enjoy it. This is not for the podcast. I enjoy hearing the different challenges and at least give me a perspective. And you know what? My perspective may be wrong sometimes, and that's okay. It's just a perspective for you to take. And I really do like that. So,
do you know a gentleman by the name of Leland Winstead? He's out of Raleigh. He commutes between Raleigh and Wrightsville Beach.
I don't.
He runs Wolfpack Ventures, which is the alumni group that seeds, startups out of NC State. I'll put you in touch with him because he has an energy background, and with your fintech background, I'm
interesting.
There's got to be like a masterminds group that can meet in Raleigh and just pull from folks like yourself, because he's also a cashed out entrepreneur, tons of experience. It would be worth our while to kind of create a little club or group just to kind of say, hey, this is my experience. I'm available for boards. And that way, as a team, we can kind of pivot and look at some of these startups and offer expertise.
In all fairness, I would welcome that. That's one of the areas I have not done a great job is penetrating can win Duke's venture arm. Not to say that, but at the universities, I have not had great success finding ways to help.
Yeah, they're very siloed. They have their own architectures and organizations and incentives.
Yep.
Well, I really appreciate you coming today. This has been a fantastic discussion, and I hope you come back on the podcast and we can talk about whatever you're working on is your next phase into your transition, whether it be investments or boards or any other activities that you have in the area.
Well, I'd love to. I really enjoy it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it all the time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amplified CEO is produced by Topsail Insider, edited by Jim Mendez-Pouget, and sponsored by Cape Fear Ventures. For more information about Amplified CEO, Richard Stroupe, or Cape Fear Ventures, please contact Krista at 910-800-0111 or Krista at topsailinsider.com.